hopefully you're all ready for some project planning information. I've got a few things to share with you this morning. Before I get started, I'd like to acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people. It's on their land that I'm on, where I work from. I'm in West End in Brisbane, right next to the Brisbane River, which is a really fortunate place to be able to spend my time. And I like to remind myself as much as possible to go outside and actually look at that river. I'd like to acknowledge their continuing connection to this place and to those waterways, and extend that acknowledgement to any First Nations people on the line, of course, and the country that you're all sitting on today, many places in Queensland. Extend that acknowledgement to the custodians where you are, and pay my respect to them. All right, my name's Stacey. I manage sector development at QCOSS, so you may have seen me on the line before when we're doing other workshops. And I do a lot of work for the Skilling Queenslanders for Work program, and I think many of you who are on the line today do have intention to put forward a funding proposal for Skilling Queenslanders for Work. However, the things we're going to talk about today are the kinds of the templates information that you can apply to any projects that you're delivering. So my hope for you today is that you'll really be able to take some of this information and apply it quite broadly to your work. All right, now little bit of housekeeping. If you keep yourself on mute, that means that we don't get the background noises that might be coming from where you are. But of course, really happy for you to take yourself off mute to ask questions and to clarify anything that we talk about, or even offer your own comments. This is something that some of you will have some experience in, and really happy to hear your comments as well. I can see that we've got some of our colleagues from the Department of Youth Justice, Employment, Small Business and Training on the line. So good morning to all of you, and really happy for all of you to make comment as well as we go through. Okay, I'm going to get started now. Hopefully you can all see that screen. Now this session is just one of quite a few different sessions that we do to support Skilling Queenslanders for Work. So I'll share some of that at the end as we go through. Okay, so today's session really is talking about the value of project planning, the elements that you might find in a project plan, and some tools to assist you to project plan. So essentially, project planning is crucial for organisations to do, as it establishes clear goals, defines roles and allocates resources, ensuring everyone is aligned and focused. And as an organisation takes on more funding and more projects, this becomes a really important element of keeping everything running smoothly. As a small organisation, or an organisation that focuses on one type of service delivery, you may not have seen a need for this in the past, but as you do take on more funding, this becomes really helpful in keeping everything moving as it should. Now, this helps identify potential risks. It helps create timelines, which really helps you identify if there's going to be some kind of delivery blockage, really. For example, these multiple deliverables across these different projects are all due in October, for example, and also we've got 3 people on leave. It really helps us plan our time as an organisation and identify where we might be running into some trouble, so we can mitigate those risks. It means that we can minimise disruptions and keeps that project on track, and ensuring everything stays on track means you have a great chance of delivering a successful project, and that sets your organisation up really well for future funding opportunities. Now, can I get an indication of how many of you are putting in a Skilling Queenslanders for Work funding proposal? You can, hands up if you can use the icons, or indicate in the chat if you're not sure. Yep, so you might be trying to figure out if this is something you want to do. Yep. Okay, so a few of you are planning on putting one in. Now, I just wanted to share before I go on, because as I go through the session, I'm going to be talking about a particular template that we have developed. So I'm going to share the Skilling Queenslanders for Work landing page on the QCOSS website. If you follow this, and you scroll down the page, there will be a section called resources, and under that there is both a Word document and a PDF of the template I'm going to be talking about. We've left a template there in Word so you can quite easily input your own text into it. So it's the project planning guide and template is the one that I'm going to be talking about today. And of course, the other thing that I refer a lot to, not necessarily much during this session, but during other sessions, is the guide to applying for funding if you haven't already seen it, which is on the department's website. So I'm just going to pop both of those in the chat because I will refer to them as we go through. Okay, so these are some of the things, this is really the importance of a project plan for Skilling Queenslanders for Work. There's a heavy reliance on partnerships in Skilling Queenslanders for Work, and for those who have applied before or have delivered a SKU project before, you will know how heavy the emphasis is on partnerships and how important they are to the success of your project. These need to be maintained. It's not something that we want to establish in the beginning and then we kind of forget to check in with those partners. So a project plan really helps us maintain those relationships in a strategic way. Now, the other thing is that SKU projects include multiple stakeholders. There are local employers, there's an RTO, there are businesses, industry stakeholders, all of these are people that you need to keep up to date. And you really need to be maintaining your relationship with all those people. So you also have limited resources within a pre-approved budget. And if you go outside the parameters of that pre-approved budget, that will cost your organisation. So really important for you to have some agreed upon parameters of how you're going to be spending that money. And a project plan helps you have some consistency throughout your organisation. If you have any staff turnover, whether that's planned or unplanned, it'll be really clear to whoever's taking on that work what was in and out of scope of your agreed budget. It makes it really clear what the expected KPIs are by the funder, and it makes that really easy to understand for anyone within the organisation actually working on the project. And participant groups may need you to be adaptive. So project plan helps us to identify where the tweaks might be as you move through the project. It helps you pre-plan what your moves as an organisation might be if any of those potential identified risks do pop up. Helps you to be nimble as an organisation because you've actually already thought about what you might do if that thing happens. Now, one of the easiest ways to effectively project plan is to complete a project plan. Now, this is a document that lays out clearly all the elements that you consider when you're planning your project. And we have developed the template. As I said, it's in the resources section of that landing page the first link that I sent through. And that includes all the elements which will help you deliver a successful SKU project. Now, what I want to be clear about is that if this is not the project plan that is referred to in the portal when you are applying for Skilling Queenslanders for Work funding. This is just something I want to be very clear about. Now, I have retained the name project plan because that's what it's most commonly referred to. This document that we're going to be talking about, that's what people most commonly call this. If it causes you any confusion or your organisation any confusion because there is a project plan element in the application portal, and this is what it looks like, this is a screenshot of the application portal, the project plan in the portal actually asks you to talk about what you're doing each week. So what we're talking about today is different to this project plan. If it's causing you any confusion, you could call instead the document that we're talking about a project implementation plan. The purpose and the elements all remain the same. So whatever you decide to call it, we'll retain the term project plan though for this webinar. And if there is any confusion, just let me know and I can clarify afterwards. Okay, so first up in that template, we talk about a project scope, and the project scope identifies the high-level details of the project, the purpose, what the deliverables are, and the time frame. And so we've called that the key objectives and the outcomes, because they're the terms that are used in the Skilling Queenslanders for work application portal. Now, these details make it really easy for someone coming into the project to know what the project is about. And again, if there's any staff turnover or people coming into the team, they can glance at this project plan and very quickly get a sense of what the point of this project is. The key objectives are also known as purpose. So some people may refer to the key objectives as purpose when they're doing their project plan, and outcomes are also known as goals. So just getting you familiar with some of the terminology that is used interchangeably. So key objectives can also be known as purpose, and outcomes can also be known as goals. And here are some examples on the screen of what you may be writing in there, depending on what it is that you're delivering. Okay, so what are some of the deliverables that you would include in your own project plan? For those of you who are planning on submitting a funding proposal, what are some of the deliverables that you would be including in your project plan? Now, some of you have your hand up, and I'm not sure it's about this, if this is about this question or if it's being left up. Angela, you have your hand up. Was it left over from previously, or did you want to answer this question? Oh, you're taking your hand down. Okay, that answers that then. I've also got Grants with a hand up. Okay, you've done the same thing. Anyone have any deliverables to share here? What would you actually be delivering as a Skilling Queenslanders for Work project plan based on your idea that you currently have? A number of workshops, yep, that's right. Thanks, Paul. Jason, you've asked whether or not we'll be sending that out. Oh, Maria's already answered you. Yes, we will. Okay, so other examples of the kinds of deliverables you would be putting in your project plan, depending on what your SKU project is, could be a 26-week learning program delivered by, and then name the registered training organisation. You could put in there your strategies to assist. Could be 3 job preparation morning teas hosted by community partner. Tailored support and assistance could be language literacy and numeracy assistance, transport assistance. So you're naming here the things that you're actually going to deliver as part of your project. So that could be many different things depending on what it is that your project idea is centered around, and even which SKU funding program you've actually applied for, because they're all quite variable. So it depends on what you're applying for and what you're seeking to deliver. But this is where, again, at a glance, someone within your organisation would be able to have a look at the project plan and see pretty clearly the things that you are going to be delivering. Now, it's really important that everyone who has involvement or responsibilities within the project are aware of this from the very beginning. Now, I know of times where I have suddenly had a task pop up which I didn't realise was actually my responsibility, and that can be a bit of a surprise. It could also be, depending on how significant the deliverable is, can be a little bit of a disaster if that person who's been assigned it actually didn't know about it and is on leave, or something else has happened and they haven't made any plans for someone else to be doing that because they weren't actually sure that they were doing it. So this is where that internal stakeholder communication becomes really important. And this will be, the significance of this will vary depending on the size of your organisation too. If you have a really small team and everyone's very aware of what one another are doing, this may be less important for you. But if you're working in an organisation where there is multiple teams and different people within the organisation who have responsibilities, this will become quite important. This is how you ensure no one's surprised when a deadline with their name against it comes up. And it will also alert you to any issues as things like key staff are on leave. For example, if I needed to equip my Skilling Queenslanders for Work project next month, and actually the finance officer who would be doing that is going on a month's leave, that's a really significant thing that I need to work into my project plan so that I can make alternative arrangements and that we can ensure someone else is able to do that, or that they're able to do that before they leave. So creating the project plan right at the beginning and everyone being aware of what their name is against and when those deliverables are, when those milestones are, is a really important aspect of project planning. Now, writing out your external stakeholders and what the nature of their involvement is in your project ensures that you don't miss any key partners or contacts, and that your internal team are really clear about how involved those stakeholders are and any kind of related tasks that they might need to do. For example, if you have a comms team and you do have some more official communications going out about your project, then your comms team are going to be needing to be aware of who the audience is for the different things that you're doing, and how involved they are, whether or not they need to be consulting with them about photos, that kind of thing. So this really just helps you get clear about who you need to talk to inside and who you need to talk to outside. Now, communication is really key, particularly with so many stakeholders involved. And if you have someone within your organisation to help with communications, they will need to know what materials need to be developed or shared. Other communication is vital to the project being successful, such as the RTO having information about the learners they are engaging with. So I've put a couple of examples on the screen here for you to have a look at. Now, another example would be the local employers. They need to know about the progress of the project, particularly if they've expressed interest in employing participants. If you're doing, for example, a 26-week program, it would be good to have a plan to update some of those potential employers as time goes on, because you'll remind them that they had expressed interest in employing some of the participants at the end, so they don't go and recruit 4 people before the end of a month before the end of your project, for example, because they've forgotten that you were doing the project. And of course, if there's been any agreements supported by letters of support in your application, and those of you who have submitted a Skilling Queenslanders for Work project previously, you'll know that you will include letters of support which outline those more formal arrangements or partnerships that you have made with local employers or businesses and others. If there's anything detailed in those letters of support of things that they've agreed to do to support your project, you'll need to keep them up to date of when those things need to happen, any changes that need to be made, etc. Okay. Now, moving on to the budget, and I know that this can be a complex thing for organisations to work through, but by the time you get to your project planning stage, and this is assuming you've been successful in gaining the funding, your budget should already be worked out, because you would have had to submit that in your funding proposal. So by the time you get to this project planning stage, it's really about just making it quite simple and clear within the project plan. You probably don't need to be doing too many calculations at this point, because that budget has already been agreed upon in your actual application. But a few things to note here. So and what I've put in the template is the same breakdown that the Skilling Queenslanders for Work portal asks for as far as budget breakdown goes. So it should fairly easily transfer across into the project plan. So for staff wages, you need to outline the industrial awards, etc. for project coordinator and other staff involved in project delivery, such as foundation skills, workplace preparation and administration support. Any costs associated with teachers or tutors are funded under the Cert 3 guarantee, so just take note of that. As far as learner support goes, there's rent, accommodation, utilities, office supplies or consumables, telecommunications, project-specific travel, mileage, parking costs. For learner support of materials and equipment, you might have folders, pens for non-accredited training, leased equipment. And for other delivery costs, you might have other course or skill sets that are not in the priority skills list, for example. Now, management fee, just take note that that can't be more than 5%, and there's also an actual cost that it can't be above. So just making note of those things. But again, They're all things that are very clear in the guide to applying for funding. And they're also things that you will have already worked out at your application phase. So once you've already received approval for the funding or you've been granted the funding, all of those costs should be able to be transferred over quite simply into your project plan. Now, I would make note here of any in-kind contributions as well, just so at a glance, anyone taking on the project will be able to see quite clearly any partnership arrangements you have with other organisations or businesses that are making in-kind contributions and what they are, as well as any in-kind contributions that your own organisation is making to the project. So again, at a glance, it's pretty clear what the costs are and what things we said we would be providing in kind and we aren't actually charging to the project. Okay, quality control. Now, quality control is the kind of thing that makes a lot of people groan, but it's a really important aspect of your project. All projects should have some kind of quality control mechanisms to ensure the project progresses towards your deliverables. You really don't want to realise, for example, in the final month of your project that you're not going to be able to meet your KPIs because not enough work has been done, or not the right kind of work has been done. Now, quality control measures also ensure that the work you deliver is good. You might write, for example, in this part of your project plan that the project will be managed by the following quality controls. You might say monthly reports to the Department of Youth Justice, Employment, Small Business and Training. I've put a screenshot of that on the screen. This is a template from the department, and this is what you're required to do every month as you update the department. In some ways, that's actually a good thing for many organisations, because what it means is you don't get behind in your reporting because you actually have to do it really regularly. It's not something that gets put on the back burner and forgotten about for months on end. So I think that's actually a really useful thing to be doing. You might also add in this part of your project plan that you're going to have fortnightly meetings with the trainer from the RTO to discuss learner progress. You might say you're going to have weekly progress meetings with the staff within your own organisation to ensure everything is on track. So think about the size of your organisation, how many people in your team are involved in your SKU project, and what kind of quality control measures would actually be useful to you as an organisation delivering the project, and put those in here. And dependent on the project that you're delivering, these quality control measures will be different. It really depends on what it is that you are delivering. Now, the under Skilling Queensland is for Work, accurate and timely reporting of participants, including the outcomes achieved, plays a really crucial role in monitoring project delivery, and that's why they do ask for the monthly updates. And now the department actually uses the performance data to monitor projects and make decisions regarding future funding opportunities. So the accuracy of this performance data is also really important for gauging progress towards targets and the overall success of Skilling Queensland is for Work as an initiative. All right, moving on to assumptions and risks. I'm just going to check that there's no questions in there. Great. Okay, everyone's going okay? I'll move on to the next section, which is assumptions and risks. Now, an assumption is something that you believe to be true, but that hasn't been verified. It's important to be clear as possible about any assumptions being made so that you can identify when additional information is required and what risks there might be. You might write, for example, that the project plan is developed with the following assumptions. We will be able to fill participant spots in the program through our usual engagement channels. That might be an assumption that you've made. You've thought about it. How are we going to recruit? How many people have we said we're going to put through this course? And yeah, we think that's a fair number, and our assumption is that we're not going to have any trouble doing that. Naming assumptions differs to identifying risks. Every day, we're faced with thousands of choices and we make assumptions all day, every day. And if we didn't, we'd never get anything done. So in project management, we need to make some assumptions to go ahead. We can't mitigate every single assumption that comes up when we're project planning. These assumptions are things that are likely to be true, but we can't absolutely guarantee. I can't absolutely guarantee that we will fill all the participant spots through our usual channels, but we've had a good think about it and we think that it is true. We think that's very likely to happen. It's unlikely that that's going to be a problem for us. So it's an assumption we're going to make. So it's for example, it's highly unlikely that your office will burn down and leave you with no training room for delivering this project. And so you're probably not going to write that up as a risk to be mitigated, or else you'd have a risk matrix that was 50 pages long if you're going to mitigate every risk that you could possibly think of. That's something that's highly unlikely to happen, but it's not impossible that it could happen. So this is where I'm demonstrating what the difference is between assumptions and risks. Many assumptions are things that you won't even really think about. For example, you wouldn't bother writing that your laptop will work throughout the project. So we recommend noting ones that have a little more bearing on the project happening. So things that you can assume is going to happen, or you assume will go ahead, but if it didn't, then would be some impact on the project. For example, the recruitment of participants through your usual channels of engagement. I think that's a fairly that's one that would be useful to note. On the other hand, risks. Identifying risks at the outset ensures you are ready to respond to potential challenges that you have assessed for likelihood and impact. It also helps you assess if risk mitigation is needed before the project commences. For example, and I know this is one that has actually happened for some organisations, particularly in Far North Queensland, wet weather prevents on-site construction experiences. That is something that is absolutely something that could be happening. If you're delivering in places where there is wet season, or well, anywhere really. Obviously wet weather can affect any part of Queensland, and if you're doing an outdoor project, that's something that you need to think about. What if we do have some really wet weeks and we have to make a plan for an alternative activity, or we have to make a plan for an alternative experience with the council? Do they have something else we could work on instead? So that's an example of something that actually could impact our project. Another example that we've put up here is that the RTO trainer changes partway through the project. So with Skilling Queensland is for Work participants, we know building rapport and relationships is really important to the overall experience of those participants, and that maybe actually having a trainer change partway through the project would have an impact on our participants, and we would need to think about how we support them through the transition to a new trainer. So these are the kinds of things that you would have some thinking around when you start your project. So if those things do happen, you have already in your risk matrix had to think about what you would do in those circumstances. So you don't have to spend too much time thinking about how to respond. You've already done a bit of thinking there, and you also give those risks a rank to according to how likely they are to happen, and what kind of impact it would have on your project delivery. So you can then decide what things are quite high and you really need to keep an eye on, or what ones are fairly low, because yes, they might happen, but our response to it is fairly easy to enact. Evaluation, another really important part of project delivery, and this is where you really arm yourself with some great information about your organisation's success, which serves you really well for future funding opportunities. So this is where you record what outcomes you're expecting and how you will measure those indicators. As you're going to be submitting monthly reports to the department, it's important to know how you'll be collecting the information you need and how regularly you need to do this. And evaluating your work is a really important part of setting yourself up for that future success. As I said, you'll be able to have all the evidence you need to show the good work that your organisation has previously done. Now, for Skilling Queensland is for Work, the evaluation you're looking at is it's fairly neat. These are things that you're going to be able to measure quite easily. It's fairly clear from the outset, based on the type of project Skilling Queensland is for Work is, or type of funding initiative Skilling Queensland is for Work. These things, that the elements that you're evaluating are fairly easy to identify and they're not difficult to measure. That's not the case for all projects. Particularly in human services type work, we're often looking at things like social impact and things that are quite difficult at times to measure. So if you're using this project planning template for other projects, the evaluation part of the project plan is going to be something that you'll probably need to think about it'll take a few conversations, and something that you might have to come back to a few times to figure out what exactly it is that you're measuring and how you're going to do that. But I think embedding it in the project planning phase right at the beginning of your project, which is when you would be doing this, is really important because it's very difficult to go back and retrospectively evaluate work that you've done, particularly if you have no baseline information to go. So really important to think about evaluation right at the beginning so you can set yourself up well to be able to do a robust evaluation of your work. As Skilling Queensland becomes more known and more competitive, it's really important that your organisation does evaluate your work well, because that, as I said, really does set yourself up for future funding success. Any questions at this stage? No? Okay, I'm going to move on to, we're actually nearing to the end. I'm going to share a few things that might help you, some external resources that might assist you with this. Here we go. So these are some external resources that you may be familiar with some of these. We use Monday.com at QCOSS for some of our project planning, but here's a few different resources that you might like to use as part of your project planning within your organisation. These are free project management softwares. I know these are used by various organisations that I know of. There are many others out there. Look, these are just three of the more common ones. But I recommend you speak to other organisations about what they use. Through these different software programs, you're able to assign tasks to people and have a interactive way of moving through the project planning phase. So, and a process that you may have within your own organisation is that after you receive funding for something like Skilling Queensland's work, you write up a project plan, you get that approved, and then you write all the deliverables up in a program like Monday.com, where you're able to assign people to tasks, then put in all the due dates and all of those kinds of things. So really up to you as an organisation, and depending on your size, how complex the projects you deliver are, you may see a need for this or you may not. But if you are looking for something to assist your organisation with your project planning, you might consider one of these programs. Now, I did want to spend a bit of time talking to you about some of the data resources that are available to you. We do have a research and evaluation hub at QCOSS, and we recently did a webinar all around using data for your Skilling Queenslanders for Work project. So if you're an organisation that is still in the midst of writing your application, or you haven't yet decided because you're not sure whether or not you have capacity or what you'd like to do as an organisation, I would recommend checking that out on the resources webpage. So the link that I shared first in the chat, if you scroll down to the resources aspect where you found the project planning template, there's also a using data in your Skilling Queenslanders for Work application. There's a guide there where we've listed out some of the open data sources that we think would be useful to you in applying for a Skilling Queenslanders for Work project. You can also watch the webinar that we had delivered on using data in your Skilling Queenslanders for Work application. So there's a few resources there to assist you in writing your application, because there's a lot of data out there, and this project, this funding is competitive, and you do need to have data to evidence the need in your community. We also have some freshly uploaded community profiles on the QCOSS website, and these have been developed to support our regional town halls that we're right in the middle of delivering at the moment. The team's been here, there and everywhere, and we've developed some, our data team have developed some community profiles to assist communities to be more informed about what's happening in their community, and to be able to use the data that's relevant to your own community to write things like funding proposals. So those community profiles are on the website at the moment. I just shared the link. You may find those useful in writing your application if you're still in the middle of doing that, or you're deciding whether or not you want to do it. There's a couple of things there to help out. And of course, what I would always mention through any of these webinars is that the department's regional officers are really happy to talk to you about your application. In fact, they want you to contact them about your application. They would, and in fact, when you go through the application portal, there is a question about whether or not you've spoken to your regional office about your idea and about your application. So you're very much encouraged to make contact with your regional office to discuss with them your project idea, and they will help you determine if you're applying for the right initiative, if there's something else that you might want to consider, and just have a chat to you about your project idea and whether or not they think that there's some tweaking that could be done. Now, again, if you're not quite at the stage of submitting yet, because it's early, we've got a little while yet before the funding closes, you may consider coming along to one of our Skilling Queens, our tips and tricks webinar. It's a fairly succinct 1 hour webinar that just goes over a few writing principles and things to consider before you hit submit on your application. And it's a little bit before the closing date, so you might find that useful. I'm going to put that in the chat as well. Tips and tricks for writing your SKU application. Okay. Now that's brought me to the end of the session. Did anyone have any questions or something that they wanted to offer as a comment before we close up? Because we've got a little bit of time, so happy to take questions or have a discussion.